Is Canada ready for one of the biggest threats to our infrastructure? The US isn't, so I would guess we probably aren't either. Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. I hope you're having a great day. I was watching Tucker the other day and he was doing an interview of this lady, Amaryllis Fox Kennedy. This lady married into the Kennedy family. In fact, she married Robert Kennedy III, Robert Kennedy Jr.'s son. In the early 2000s, though, she was a CIA officer, and she has a lot of knowledge about threats to the United States and subsequently Canada. In particular, she talked a lot about EMPs, and that's going to be the topic of this video. But before getting into that, I do want to say that no, I am not AI generated. If this was an AI generated image, I would probably make myself 40 years younger. Yes, I know that sometimes my lips do not match with the sound, but that's because I have an old computer. Now that that's out of the way, let's go to the Tucker interview.
You made reference a moment ago to changes in the first years of the Biden administration, first months, to our EMP preparedness. Can you explain what an EMP is and what changed?
Do you remember over the last couple of weeks, there have been solar storms, and we've gotten to see the northern lights much, farther south, and maybe people were warned there might be slight disruptions to electronics, but for the most part, it's been beautiful and uneventful. Those solar storms can be far more powerful than that. The Carrington event is probably the best known, right? In 1859 was it set, telegraph operators on fire, set forest fires, damaged the transatlantic cable miles beneath the ocean. NASA says that were it to happen again now, given the interconnected electrical grid that didn't exist then, that, we'd be looking at darkness around most of the globe, possibly for years, up to 7 years. These electromagnetic ejections happen from the sun every 100 to 150 years of that magnitude. Of course, that was in 1850, so we're coming up due for one. Their current estimate is about 12% chance per decade. Fairly likely that in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime, we will experience another one of these Carrington events. In fact, there was one in 2012 that came extremely close to us that would have been absolutely catastrophic, but didn't hit.
A similar event happened in Quebec in 1988. It was fairly localized, and I'm not sure why, but it does still happen.
And then that would mean no electricity for years.
Right. That sounds inconvenient, and, maybe people can see how it would be. It would cause some loss of life. But I think there's part of us when we hear that thinks like, I could use a break from Twitter, like it might be kind of nice. The thing is that what people don't realize is that the world is no longer what it was in the 19th century, that almost everything at this point involves what they call SCADA systems, which are these small computers that use sensors to move valves, whether it's how much natural gas can move through a pipeline, when to turn on the coolers in a nuclear power plant to make sure that there's not a meltdown, when to allow water to go over the Hoover Dam to prevent flooding, air traffic control, traffic lights, and so on, all operated by SCADA systems now. Those are all susceptible to attack. What we were just talking about was in the case of a solar flare. But humans being what they are, they've learned to weaponize this. And we know this because we have done it. Starfish Prime was the first test in 1962 where the U.S. realized this could be used as a weapon, did the test above the Pacific, and it knocked out capabilities in Hawaii and farther beyond. And so there was that recognition. We now know that the Soviets figured it out even earlier. They told us during the kind of détente in the 90s that they had already done 7 tests at that point over Kazakhstan and wiped the entire power grid of Kazakhstan, actually created a lot of suffering in the process. But they saw it as having huge potential as a weapon because of that, and began developing out a super EMP, which is very specifically tuned not for yield, but for electromagnetic pulse. These are detonated 30 kilometers or so above a country. So you're not actually destroying anybody with the explosion. It is with using the EMPs to kill the grid, is now by many of our adversaries mentioned in their military manuals as no contact wars. So this is, win World War III without ever having to have contact with the adversary.
This does sound awfully science fiction to me. However, we did learn in school about the EMP effect of detonating a nuclear warhead. And it does make a lot of sense that an adversary could knock out all the electronics, all the communications in a country and cause chaos, and then follow it up with some other attack.
When you look at the delivery mechanisms that are available here and the way that we're seeing EMPs discussed in China and Iran and Russia, North Korea, there are a wide variety of them. I mean, North Korea in 2013 ran the exact optimal orbit with its KSM-3 satellite over New York and Washington, D.C. that would be the optimal delivery for this kind of a weapon. And on the very same day, sent military special forces essentially break into PG&E substation near San Jose in California. And
North Korean...
Well, thought to be North Korean, never actually identified or apprehended. Exactly the same day on the West Coast that they did the satellite run on the East Coast.
What'd they do at the PG&E substation? Pacific Gas and Electric, by the way.
They were assessed to be extremely professional by the SEAL trainers who came in later to look at the site. They knew about an underground comms tunnel that they went in and cut communications and used sniper fire to damage but not take offline 17 transformers.
In the United States?
In the United States, yep.
Wait, we had a North Korean team of saboteurs or saboteurs sent by North Korea.
Certainly professional special forces of some variety, thought to be North Korean, just outside San Jose, Coyote, California.
I don't remember.
No, it was
about this.
Very, very downplayed as vandalism. A few months later, in July, they found 2 SA-2 nuclear capable missiles in the bay of a tanker in the Gulf of Mexico. And this was all really as the North Korean tensions were mounting. Those are 3 distinct ways to attack our electrical grid that were all mounted within a handful of months.
So there's vandalism, there are natural weather events, including the solar flares, the storms that you mentioned, and then there's EMP. So the threats to the grid and to the lives of 350 million Americans are completely real and in some sense imminent. Like we know this is going to happen at some point. So the federal response hardening the grid changed when Biden got elected?
Yeah, and this is what is really hard to accept. And it's very similar actually to what happened with the border wall, which is here you have 2 policies, the EMP executive order that President Trump was the first president to ever direct all parts of government to work together to be sure that the American people were protected from intentional EMP attack after decades of knowing that our primary adversaries were all considering it, training for it, had weapons programs designed to do this. And by the way, I mean, before we get to Biden, the primary delivery mechanism in all of those tests was a high-altitude balloon.
A high-altitude balloon. If you recall, last year, China sent high-altitude balloons over Canada and the United States. They weren't shot down until after they left the continental United States. And there may have been a very good reason for that. Now, China claimed that they were weather balloons. We all thought that they were spy balloons. But it turns out it may have been a simulated attack to see what our response would have been. When you consider what the North Koreans did in 2013, it makes a lot of sense.
When we then have China, a primary adversary who we know have talked in their training sessions and their training manuals about using high altitude balloons to deliver this kind of an EMP device and have done tests where it's the same exact payload as the high altitude balloons that were recovered. China's sending the space balloons. The high altitude balloons. They've already come across our own territory. Clearly, this is on the minds of our adversaries, and it's an imminent danger. It's certainly the area in which we are most vulnerable for maximum casualties and impact. And yet, President Trump was the first president to say across different parts of government, who sometimes have a hard time talking to one another, I want you to work together to make sure that the American people are protected from this. And by the way, it's not even that expensive in the big scheme of government spending. To do it really well, the cost estimate was $2 billion, which, we've just sent another $100 billion to Ukraine. Then Biden takes office and frankly, in my mind, just inconceivably revokes that.
I cut out a lot of the interview for time, but she went on to talk about all of the military manuals for our primary adversaries, North Korea, Russia, China, and Iran, and how they all include the use of EMPs with various delivery systems. How Russia is even putting nuclear weapons into space for this very purpose. And it begs the question, if the United States isn't prepared, how about Canada? Canada is usually far behind the eight ball when it comes to these things. We're not even at the 2% of GDP spending that NATO requires us to be. And it doesn't look like we're getting there anytime soon. But the good news is it doesn't take all that much to harden our electrical grids. Now, I tried to look up what Canada is doing on this. I just couldn't find anything, which means that they're probably not doing anything. I would invite you, however, if you know about what Canada is doing, to please let me know, because I'd love to do a follow-up on this. I think this is a major threat, and Canada really needs to pick up its socks in this area. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to know what you think. Put your comments down below. And while you're at it, please like this video, share with your friends and on social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification so you never miss another video. Also, please join me on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific Time for my live stream where you can join in on the conversation. Finally, I do teach the Canadian Firearm Safety courses. These are courses that you need to get your firearms license, also known as a PAL, which you are required to have to purchase and possess a firearm in Canada. If you're interested in taking one of those courses and eventually getting your firearms license, and you live on Vancouver Island or will be on Vancouver Island for any length of time, please look me up. There's contact information on my website, which is linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.